Joining us now, though, is Liz Peek, noted writer. She's on The Hill. She's on Financial Times, and she's a noted author and a frequent guest on Fox News, Fox Business News, sometimes at 5 a.m. When I get up, I'll put on Fox when I'm up preparing for my show. And there she is, Liz Peek, and she's with us now. Hi, Liz.
Good morning. Happy to join you.
Liz, it's always my honor to have you on. You're so much fun, and you're so smart. So let's start, Liz, with this mess in Virginia. Now, you're in New York. I grew up in New Jersey, so it's a little bit different here. I mean, the first time I ever saw a statue of a Confederate general or something is when I came to the South. I never saw them. We didn't have any in New Jersey. But let's start with Virginia. What do you think, being in New York, what do you think of this whole thing?
Well, I don't think it really matters where you are. I think it's a tremendous statement about the hypocrisy of Democrats that they jump on people in the other party who transgress even slightly on racial issues or, heaven knows, sexual assault issues, and yet when it's their own home turf and when there's a political price to pay, not so much. And so what we saw in the last 24 hours is, yes, there were Democrats willing to push indictment against various people in your own party, but then when it looked like that could really, as I say, suffer some consequences, they backed off. This is an embarrassment. I mean, but Democrats are being hoisted on their own petard here, right? I mean, they have sort of set out a zero tolerance for anything that even smacks of racism, even if it's something that goes back 30 or 40 years, or even if it's something that was unintended or not very consequential, and the same thing with sexual assault. And the problem is, if you turn over a lot of stones, you're going to find a lot of beetles. And the truth is, a lot of people have something that they said in their past, or that they tweeted, or that they put up on Facebook that is not going to pass muster in this day and age. But I think the real problem for Democrats, obviously here, is all of a sudden they've changed their tune. I love the fact that the New York Times yesterday, I guess it was, or the day before, wrote sort of a puff piece about, blackface is something that the whole country has engaged in over the years, kind of a tradition. And they know better. They know it's an offensive thing. It was certainly an offensive thing with Northam did it not that long ago. So, I think it's kind of a horror, to be honest.
Well, I don't know how it's going to play out. Nobody says they're going to resign. Governor Northam says now on multiple media outlets that he's hanging in there and he's not going to resign. And the lieutenant governor here, Justin Fairfax, could be faced with a lot of things. I don't know what is going to happen there. I'm not a lawyer, but he says he's not going to resign. 2 women have come out with some pretty serious allegations here.
Yeah.
Scary.
Well, it's certainly the women accusing Fairfax appear on the surface to be somewhat more credible, for example, than Christine Blasey Ford in accusing Kavanaugh, in that these women, at least the first one who came out, had written to friends about the episode. There's in other words, there's some documentation of her reaction to it when it took place. She knew, and also she knew where, when exactly it did take place, whereas you remember with Christine Blasey Ford, admittedly talking about something further in the past, she really couldn't come up with any details, any corroborating evidence, any witnesses, etc., or even anyone she talked to about it. So her charges were truly in a fact-free vacuum. That isn't to say that they weren't true. I mean, none of us will ever really know what took place or who was involved. But in this case, it does seem like there is a much firmer charge to be leveled. And, I think this guy's in trouble, and he's called for an FBI investigation. That seems to me to be kind of playing, what is it, a good offense is the best defense. We'll see.
How do you think it plays out?
Well, I don't think any of these folks are going anywhere. If this investigation really does come up with some convincing evidence that he was responsible for 1 or 2 sexual attacks, or if other people come out of the woodwork with similar stories, I just cannot help but think he has to resign. But clearly he's going to go down, kicking and screaming because he doesn't want to leave office.
How about the honesty of Northern Virginia Democratic Congressman Don Beyer, who says on a TV show on Sunday, well, even though Attorney General Mark Herring did the same thing as Ralph Northam, we all called on Northam to resign because he'd be replaced by a Democrat one way or the other. But we're not going to call on Attorney General Mark Herring to resign, even though he did the exact same thing that we called on Governor Northam to resign because he'd be replaced by a Republican, and we can't have that.
Yeah,
what did you make of that?
He has exposed, and it didn't really need someone to actually step up and say that. I think it was pretty obvious that was the motivation. They don't want to lose control of the State House. And, I hope voters punish them for the hypocrisy and for the rank partisanship down the road in Virginia. I don't know if they will or not, but, there really isn't much excuse for this.
All right, I just got to read a quick text here by Amy, different topic. Last segment, Amy, I'm going to read this text. Amy says, gas taxes do not prevent tolls. Just ask anyone in Northern Virginia. Gas taxes pay for metro, not roads. So we get stuck with tolls. Amy, not true. Not true, Amy, because the Bob McDonnell transportation tax increase of 2013, we have revitalized transportation on the interstates in Southeast Virginia and the peninsula up through D.C. So that's just not true. Now, separate topic, Liz Peek. You're not involved in our road fiasco in Virginia.
Can't weigh in on that.
I know. All you have to do to come down here is take Amtrak and you're good to go. Now, let's talk about this tremendous Trump economy that's going on. And the Democrats of the far left now looking at the new Green Deal, and they want, I guess, to eliminate airplanes, cars, I guess 100% solar power or something, wind, and no energy, or I don't know what they're doing, 90% taxes for people that make over a certain amount of money. But meantime, we have this booming economy, right? 300,000 jobs just created in January, doubled expectations, wages up 3.2%, 2018. Regulations are down. Entrepreneurialism is up. Small businesses exploding. The tax cut hasn't even really hit yet. It will in the next 90 days when people start actually doing their taxes and saying to themselves, oh, my goodness, I got back $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 on the same income I had. What is the Democrats, the new Green Deal, where are they going with this?
I think they're going into really deep water, and I say that because the proposal, if you actually read it, it is so ludicrous in terms of its scope, its intention to sort of completely overhaul everything about American economic life, not just energy. If it were just confined to energy, I would say it's impractical, it's not going to work, and it's never happening. Fine. But this has things like, as you know, rebuilding every home in America to make it energy clean, pure, energy saving, redoing things like how businessmen compete. I mean, honestly, I read it, and other people have said the same thing, and I really did start laughing. It is so completely nuts. There are phrases in there like they want to guarantee Americans access to nature. I have no idea what that means. Anyway, it is astonishing to me. Here's what's astonishing. It is not amazing that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez might dream up some far-fetched thing like this. She's young, she's idealistic. You know, this is what she might have written as a theme paper in high school, but instead now she's a congresswoman, so she puts it out there. What's amazing to me is that supposedly serious people like Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, Elizabeth Warren are backing it. I mean, where is their independent judgment? Where is their seriousness? Because here's what's going to happen. For sure, AOC is going to demand a vote on this in the House. It is just a resolution. It's not a law. But it's a statement of purpose or statement of ambition. So she's going to demand a vote. So all those Democrats in the House have been bullied or will be bullied into putting their name behind it. So anyone running for office in the next cycle, the Republican challenger will be saying, well, gosh, you voted here to get rid of jet airplanes. Because, by the way, there is no airplane that travels on anything other than carbon fuels other than jet fuel at this point. So Hawaii, as someone said, is now a state that's cut off from the mainland. I mean, it's so ludicrous. Instead of airplanes, this proposal has high-speed rail crisscrossing the country, which, we can only imagine how long it would actually take to build something like that. But anyway, they are putting their own legislators at risk with supporting something that makes no sense whatsoever. I was on a TV program yesterday where a reporter went down to University of Miami and talked to students, and oh my gosh, they loved it, and they loved it because they said Elizabeth Warren's behind it, it must be okay, AOC likes it, must be okay. And then when the reporter got into the details of, you understand we'll be not using gasoline cars anymore, there won't be airplanes, things like that, everyone would say, well, that doesn't make any sense to me, I can't imagine that happening. Well, these students apparently have more insight about it or more realistic impression about it than Elizabeth Warren. So I think this is an embarrassment. Serious people should not be taking this seriously, and voters should not be taking those people seriously.
Yeah, but we've got presidential candidates, like you said, that are actually endorsing the bill, like Kamala Harris. So this thing is real. I mean, and she is going to AOC is going to make it come to the floor as a resolution and get people on the record. So it's kind of bizarre, but I guess that's why we have a legislative process. I just can't imagine, like my former governor, Terry McAuliffe, who I'm a fan of, is going to announce for president soon. I can't wait to get him on my show and ask him what he thinks about the new Green Deal.
Well, and he's a fairly practical guy.
Yes, he is.
Who's been willing to, for example, he's very big on private-public partnerships, right. Something a lot of Democrats oppose, things like that. I would be shocked if he actually lines up with this thing. Somebody out there is going to finally say, no, this really doesn't make any sense. By the way, something we're not even talking about, America has a gigantic competitive advantage on energy with almost every other country. Our electricity costs, and this is something AOC has no idea about, are exactly 1/4 the price of electricity in Germany. So if you tell Americans, and by the way, the reason the Germans are paying so much, partly it's taxes, but also it's because they have gone very green in Germany, or they've tried to, and they don't use their own indigenous natural gas. They've gone to more exotic forms of renewable energy. And so they are paying a price for that. When you say to Americans, as by the way happened in Washington State, as you remember during the 2018 election, hey, we want you to pay a little more to have a greener state, voters say no. They care. It is really fascinating to me. All the surveys show voters care very much about climate change. They think it's a real problem. But then if they're asked to pay literally like $1 more for electricity, the answer is no dice. So you tell me, I mean, people are being shamed into being very concerned about climate change, but they don't really understand what it means to be concerned about it. They certainly don't understand what the price tag would be for this Green New Deal. But boy, oh boy, is this an opening for Republicans in the next election.
If they can take advantage of it.
Yeah, but they can. I mean, this is just too easy. Even the Republicans can take advantage of this.
All right, Liz Peek. We're with Liz Peek. Follow her on Twitter at Liz Peek. You can read her in The Hill. She's also on Fox News all the time. She's become a celebrity and a star on commenting on business issues. Plus, you need to read her. Just go to lizpeek.com. Must read. Follow her on Twitter at Liz Peek, LizPeek. I love easy Twitter handles, and she's got one of the easiest, so that goes to your credit. Okay, let's get to what looks like, Liz, it looks like there's a compromise to avoid a government shutdown. The Republicans and Democrats conferee saying they have a deal, $1.375 billion for barriers for the president, not exactly the 570 wanted, but something. And also they reached a compromise on the Democrats tying it to eliminating 15,000 beds for ICE detainees, in their wisdom, trying to basically eliminate ICE altogether. Should the president take the deal, Liz? What do you think?
Well, I think he should. And I know that people who want this wall built aren't going to be happy with it, and you're going to hear a lot from Ann Coulter and her group. But here's the thing. Americans don't want the government to be shut down again, and
Right.
I do think that a second shutdown would be much harsher in terms of the economic impact than the first was, because there were a lot of things in the pipeline that now have kind of gotten caught up. But I think it'd be worse this time around because government employees have had it. I don't think they want, we saw some of that going on when all of a sudden air traffic controllers were not coming to work. And I think that's really what propelled President Trump to reopen the government the last time. Nobody wants the government shut down. They need to move on. But, by the way, this will continue to be a campaign theme for him. I think a lot of people, these Border Patrol people who are telling us they need barriers, that barriers are effective, that's not pie in the sky. That's real life. And I think the president can use that to his advantage when he runs. And by the way, they're still constructing the fence. They're still going to do more fencing. So all of that is good. I do think that the Democrats caved as well on this issue of the detention beds. But again, it kind of highlights their extreme position on immigration. I mean, if you apprehend this all had to do with interior enforcement, as it's called, not border enforcement. In other words, people being rounded up by ICE for having committed crimes. If you apprehend someone, you have to put them somewhere because there is a legal process that ensues, and they need those detention beds to kind of process the people that they're arresting. So what Democrats are trying to do, as you point out, are basically handcuff ICE. And it all is part of a grand narrative that President Trump has significantly changed our immigration enforcement practices from what was going on under Obama. And, John, I wrote, like in 2015, a piece in which I quote the New York Times talking about how most of the people deported under Obama, 2/3, had not been guilty of any infraction other than possibly a traffic violation. They were not criminals. The whole idea that Trump has really changed, moved the needle, and is just throwing people out of the country or arresting them simply for being here illegally, it is not true. It is not true any more than it was true under President Obama. This whole narrative, and I call it that because it is, it's a story that began when President Trump took office because he had been harsher in his language about immigration. The reality is the enforcement really hasn't changed very much. But when Americans see these caravans approaching our border and our border agents standing there unable to do anything about it, basically, and only, frankly, when it looks as though a barrier or a wall actually prevented them from just simply streaming across the border, I do think Americans kind of have a wake-up call that our border, in our entire immigration policy as it relates to the southern border, is not working. This is not acceptable that we have hundreds of thousands of people entering the country illegally every year. Yes, the numbers are down. They are still way, way too high.
The proposal that the Democrats were trying to craft with a compromise on even the $1.375 billion was to reduce the number of detention beds for ICE detainees from the current 47,000 to 32,000.
Yeah, it was a reduction. Actually, I think they at one point had a lower number in mind.
Yes,
but I think that's right.
So I said, well, right now we've got over 40,000 people detained.
42, I think.
So 10,000 would just have to be released. Now these are not people that were rounded up because somebody said they're my next door neighbor, right? These were people that were on the record, or they were detained for having committed a crime and then found out to be illegal. So that's why they were detained.
That's right.
Right? They were criminal. And the Democrats just wanted to release them back into the streets. I just, for the life of me, I couldn't figure out why you would want to take a criminal that's did something bad and just release them.
Because you have people, again, the progressive left, people like AOC are talking about abolishing ICE. So right now, I mean, it is astonishing that a party has allowed itself to be totally co-opted by these extreme people on the left And, by the way, some people would say, well, that happened with Republicans with the Tea Party. Maybe, but those people were not lofting such lunatic ideas. The idea that we're going to get rid of ICE, which basically tries to cut down on sex trafficking and child and basically using children to get across the border and all these sort of heinous crimes, not to mention drugs and so forth, I don't know really what they're thinking. I mean, they now have taken such an extreme position that they basically are welcoming. They're basically welcoming illegal immigrants into our country. And how are they doing that? By softening ever more the apprehension mechanism, people being caught at the border, but also through sanctuary cities, and also by enticing or giving benefits to people in the country illegally, as we're doing here in New York. If you're in New York and you're not documented, you get free medical care at hospitals. You get the possibility of applying for free college tuition, which, by the way, is also available in California. Why do states do this? Partly because in the census, they are going to all these people will be counted, and the political power of New York and California increases with every illegal person in the country. It is simply a body count, and the more bodies you have, the more representatives you have in Congress. I did some numbers recently that showed that I believe the number was California has 5 extra representatives, 5 seats in the House, because they have so many illegal immigrants in their state. I think that is so wrong, but that's the way it works. And it honestly just flabbergasts me. And, of course, those also translate into votes in the Electoral College. So why would California or New York resist this? They don't.
A stunning analysis by Liz Peek. That's why we have her on. At Liz Peek. You can follow her on
Twitter.
Twitter.
It's really true, and it's really horrifying. I can't understand why people aren't more up in arms about it. But
that's
anyway.
my point exactly. Like, I look at this, like I was reading about this yesterday, and I'm like, why would you say, let's reduce the number of beds so we can release criminals that have been apprehended for, allegedly committing a crime while they're waiting due process or whatever they do? Why would you just say, well, no beds, have a nice day, hey, don't do it again? I mean, what?
Yeah, I know.
I mean, why not just release criminals that are U.S. citizens into the streets? I don't know where they're going with this. I really don't, Liz. I have no idea. Normally I could figure this out, but I can't for the life of me. There was an op-ed today in the New York Times. I forget the author. I read it, but there was an op-ed somebody sent me in the New York Times where somebody saying that, the Democrat, and this person was a Democrat, and he said our party should just own up to the fact we want open borders and let anybody in and stop feigning we don't.
Yeah.
And the writer was in favor of it, but he was like, let's stop talking about border security. We don't want border security. Our position as a Democrat is let anybody in that would like to come in.
Yeah.
Doors open.
And it's a valid point, because Nancy Pelosi always talks about, oh, yes, we definitely want border security. No, they do not want border security. And I think this latest contretemps over the detention beds makes that pretty clear.
We got to roll.
All right. Nice to talk to you, John.
John Fredericks Radio Network. Thanks, Liz. Follow her at Liz Peek.